Hi, I just released a comprehensive Turian model port for Blender, imported from Mass Effect Andromeda. Let me show you how it works. If you download the file from MEA, you're going to get this large zip file here. Inside it, you're going to have everything you need. If instead you are coming from Open3D Lab, you're going to see these three separate files. Due to Open3D Lab's slow upload speed, I wanted to break these out so that if I made any changes to the blend files, I don't need to re-upload all of the textures over again and waste everyone's time and bandwidth. At a minimum, you're going to need the blend files and the textures. The extras are just extras. The extras include the original meshes ripped straight out of the game, and also the unfucked face models. If you know anything about importing models from Mass Effect Andromeda, you'll notice that many of the alien faces are kinda fucked. And this are those files fixed so that if you wanted to, you could take just the head and put them on your own custom model and do your own head hacking and whatever you want there. Because of the sheer size of the textures and because there are two different blend files, it's not reasonable for me to package the texture files into the blend file itself, so they're separate. The blend file uses relative file references to locate the textures, so as long as the textures, as they are here, the folder that says textures and has all the different subfolders with textures in it, are located in the same folder as these blend files, the blend files should be able to locate and use the textures just fine. So when you extract the files from Open3D Lab, extract the textures folder, and extract the blend files to the same location, and everything should work fine. Anyway, here's how they work. Both of these files are very similar. They have basically the same setup, the same layout, the same functions, with some very minor differences. So if I show you one, I've shown you both. Right away when you open it up, you can see we have a basic layout. On the left, we have a big text document, and the text document goes through what all of the different appearance options do. We also have a rig script, which if not run when you open up the file, you will need to run. The model itself is rigged using Rigify, so if you're familiar with how Rigify works, it'll work just like that. These are using the original bone mesh weights from the game. I did not reweight any of these, so they should be fairly high quality. And just like with any competent rig, you can take the bones and enable or disable them, their visibility however you would like. All of the functions that you could want are there. And this includes the face. The face isn't perfect, but it is set up to work. So you can open the jaw, you can manipulate the mandibles, the eye tracking works. If enable textures. The eye tracking does work. And that's all what you might expect from a regular rigged model, but the thing that sets this apart is that this includes every single armor piece and every single civilian body option and all of the various components that come with them for Turians that exist within Mass Effect Andromeda. To access these options, you need to be in pose mode, and you click in the appearance menu here any one of the body parts. And then under properties, under item, under properties, you will see what options are available for each item. Starting from the head, we have a simple face toggle, which toggles the head on and off. We have a color option for the base metal-ish bone plate on the face. We can change the skin tint, the color of the rear plate, and the color of the scales on the side. You can also change how metallic the face is. You can go no metalness at all the way up to full metalness. Within the lore, there is some metal in their chitinous bone armor plate things. So technically you could say that at least some metallicity is lore accurate. Since that may not look fantastic, I leave it up to you to determine what you want to do with it. You can set the face paint type, of which there are 6, and you can set the color of the paint as well. You can change the hue of each eye. Each eye is separately controlled, and you can also change its dilation. So you can have a large dilation of the eyes or really small pinprick pupils. On top of that, you can also set up various mesh options. For example, you can turn on a helmet, turn on the shades, or turn on a hood. Now, because some of these meshes don't work well with each other, they conflict and they intersect, I've set these up so that if there are conflicting meshes, that one of them is going to be disabled if both of them are enabled in this option. So for example, the hood and the shades are compatible with each other. They work just fine. There's no reason that you can't have them both at the same time, so that option is present. However, neither the hoods nor the shade work when the helmet is enabled. So if the helmet is enabled, the shades and the hood are not. You can also set the color of the headgear as well. So for the helmet only has one color option that you can control for the main basic tint. But the hood, on the other hand, has two others. The helmet has a stripe, two stripes, I think. It also has a camo layer, which you can enable the intensity of, and you can also change the color of it to whatever color you like, and you can also change the color of the metal. Finally, if there is some glowing parts on the headgear, you can change both the intensity and the color of it. By default, it's at 10. It goes all the way up to 100 if you really want it. This also affects the shades. You can also change the color, so you can set the shades to be a different color as well. And if you turn on the helmet, you can see that the glowing bits on the helmet are also changed. Finally, the last thing you can do is you can change the color of the glass, which also affects the shades. You can also change the index of refraction of the glass and the color dispersion. This works best if you're in cycles. So the index of refraction is set to a default. This isn't a realistic index of refraction for glass. Glass is more like 1.4, but in my opinion, this looks better by still retaining at least some refraction index, but not being so high of a refraction index that things start looking weird. Like, this is what glass normally looks like, and now it looks kind of weird. So by default, it's at there, but you can go all the way down to 0.8 and all the way up to 1.6. These are soft limits, so you can go lower and you can go higher if you really want. And finally, the color dispersion. So this color glass shader here has set up a very slight hint of color dispersion, color refraction going on, where each of the different shades of color are being refracted differently. And you can enhance that to make it look much more apparent, or do the opposite, or you can turn it off entirely. For the bodies, default is this under armor. You can turn it off. You can switch it to Vetra's armor at 2. Then options 3 through 10 are all different civilian bodies. Options 8 and 9 are basically identical, but with a skinnier waist on one. I believe the skinnier waist is what is used for Vetra's sister, Sid. Just like with the headgear, you can change the body colors however you would like. Each one typically has about 3 different options. This, of course, does not affect Vetra, but these color options are universal for all of the bodies other than Vetra. So if you switch to any civilian body, these color options are going to be preserved. Similarly, these ones have a stripe. Some bodies have more stripes than others. This base Under Armor has 2 stripes. Most civilian outfits have 3, and then one of them, this one here, has 4 stripes. There's also a camo option. Only the base Under Armor here has a camo layer to it. But just as before, you can change the intensity and its color. And just like before, there's also a metal color, and if there is metal on some of the other bodies, including Vetra's body, the metal color is preserved and also applies to that armor. Now for the base armor, there is this torso-heavy armor option. This is where many of the Turian armor customizations for the multiplayer models and many of the enemies come from. First you layer this torso-heavy armor on, and from that it has its own separate set of colors that you can set up however you would like. And it has its own stripe. There's only 2. These colors look ugly, I'm just giving them as an example. Also its own camo layer with its own camo color as well, and its own separate metal color controller. There is a glowing light intensity controller as well, just like on the helmet for the headgear. The difference is that this one controls everything. So if we set it up all the way and change the color of it, this affects both the base Under Armor as well as the torso heavy armor, as well as Vetra's glow on her armor. The civilian armors don't have any glow on them, so this only really affects those. The torso heavy armor is also set up with its contingencies, so although it is visible here on this base under armor, it does not work and is not compatible with any other body. So if you turn off the body, or switch to Vetra's armor or any of the civilians, even with this box enabled, the torso heavy armor is disabled. With the torso heavy armor enabled, you can now enable and disable armor belts. For the under armor, there are 2 different belts. The first one, it has no color customization options. The first one you can only control the metal color of, but the second one you can control both the metal of as well as 2 basic colors, and its own camo layer and camo color. Now, Vetra's armor also has a belt, and by default it is disabled. So if you want the belt enabled, you just have to switch the armor belt to any option, either 1 or 2, and that enables Vetra's armor belt. There's also the jetpack. Just like with the heavy armor, this one requires other things to be met before it can be visible. The armor jetpack in particular requires that the torso heavy armor is enabled, which of course also requires that the base body be set to the under armor. So if you disable the torso heavy armor, even with the armor jetpack enabled, it also turns off and it doesn't enable no matter what other body is enabled. You just need to have base under armor and torso heavy armor enabled. The jetpack has its own color options, of which there are 2, plus a metal color. There's also a jetpack cloth. This cloth just dangles from the side. You can set its color, and it has a stripe pattern on it with some gang symbols, and you can set the color of those as well. And again, like with the others, the jetpack cloth's contingencies are set up so it requires the jetpack to be enabled. So if you disable the jetpack or don't meet the contingencies for having the jetpack be visible, the jetpack's not going to be visible and the cloth isn't either. Now, one neat feature of this model is that there is cloth physics applied to this. It's disabled by default, but if you click the checkbox there, now the physics is enabled. So if we play on the timeline and move it about a bit, you can see that there is some limited cloth physics. I'm not very good at doing cloth physics, so there could very well be a better way of configuring this. I don't really know how, but it's there if you want to use it. You will notice, however, that the cloth kind of clips into this jetpack. Now, this is actually the result of a bug in Blender. There is a portion of this jetpack that is duplicated and set up as a collision model, so that the cloth can bounce and interact with it. However, if the jetpack's visibility in the render is disabled, it will not be visible to the physics sim, and therefore any kind of physics object is just going to pass right through it. That is intended. However, if that render visibility option is controlled by a driver, as it is here, and then you enable it with that driver, Blender seems to forget that it's actually enabled or supposed to be enabled in the sim, and as a result, any physics object just kind of passes right through it. The way to fix that and make Blender remember and recognize that it is in fact enabled in the sim is to just go into this option here and click on it. It kind of fixes it. It's a little bit weird. I don't really know why it's that way, but it is. So now if we run the sim, you can see that the cloth interacts with the jetpack and doesn't phase right through it. Couple other options that are available. We have a scarf that can be enabled or disabled. It doesn't look great from behind. It's designed for the female necks, which are skinnier, but it can be used to help cover up some clipping, and it works with some of the civilian bodies. So for example, with Vetra's body, you can see that there is some very visible clipping going on, but if you enable the scarf, it hides it a little bit, at least from the front. And then also civilian armors 8 and 9. This is where the scarf was actually intended for. So the scarf is going to be visible on those as well. And just like before, you can set the color of the scarf however you would like. Vetra's coattails are disabled by default, and you can enable them here. Casual Outfit 3, which is option 5 on the base body, has its own separate jetpack, which is visible here. The colors of the jetpack are controlled through the jetpack color options here, and the glow color and intensity are whatever you set at the regular body glow intensity configuration properties. Now in-game, Vetra's sister Sid has 2 pieces of little body flare that she wears on her outfit. I've taken those and made them work with each of the other civilian options. Not every single one works, but every single civilian body has at least one flare that can be enabled or disabled. These two checkboxes down here control the visibility of those flare options, so if you have them both enabled, you will see that they will toggle on and off. The top one controls the flare on the left arm, the bottom one controls the flare on the right arm, if it works. For models that have a large little sleeve at the end here, there will not be a flare option for those because it just doesn't work. But in all other cases, they're going to be there and they should work. And just like with the others, you can control their colors fairly easily. So for example, by default, they're kind of a gold color, but you can change their colors. Either one set independently, and then the one on the right has a little color pad here that you can also change. Now these types of options continue throughout the rest of the body. So for example, we have independent and separate left and right shoulder controls, which has their own series of armor pieces, some of which have their own visibility contingencies. So for example, this mid-arm plate obviously isn't going to work with this large heavy metal plate, so the heavy metal plate overrides its visibility options. So no matter what you have set in this little option here, it will not be visible if it is not compatible. And they have their own colors. Some of these don't have every single color option. So for example, this one has 3 separate colors, but this one does not. It only has 2. Also, not all of them have stripes. So if it doesn't have a stripe option, it's obviously not going to be visible, but you can change all of them however you would like. Sometimes there is an alternative base default color. So for example, for this one here, we can see this shoulder by default is a brown color, but there is an alternative color that is gray, and you can fade between them however you would like. And as I noted, these are independent per side. So left and right side both have independent options. So you can have one set up to be one and the other to be set up to be a completely different appearance. Similarly with the forearms, there are their own separate options for the glove and the forearm plate. However, I should note that the left forearm option, anything other than this first one only works with either no glove or the heavy glove. Every other configuration requires the next glove, the kind of light glove, to be enabled. And that goes up to a big old spike, and this one has some greeble options that will go up as well. Just as before, you can set their own colors, and they have an alternative color as well. It's everything you've seen before. And then finally for the legs, we have a upper thigh and an upper shin. Most of these are compatible with each other, except on the shin there is a knee pad, and this knee pad is not compatible with the first heavy thigh armor. So whenever the heavy thigh armor is enabled, no matter what you have the shin armor set to, it's not going to be visible. Anyway, with this, you can basically configure any number of different appearance options for this character. It's basically a character builder, and you can do it however you would like. If you would like to use this in your project and not start with this, what you should do is you should open up your project that you're working in, append from this file, and then append this entire collection here. If you do that, once you then run the rig script, you should have this model functioning exactly as it is here within your new project. All of the preview art created for this was created using just this exactly as you see it without me modifying anything. Anyway, that's an overview of how this model works. I'll put links to it down below. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm not going to do this again. This was a pain in the ass. Yeah, good luck and have fun.